Part of Transformania, which is creating new language for people who experience manic consciousness, is just creating new meaning and new memes that can replicate through us if they resonate. I'm just having fun playing with words, and I don't know if any of it resonates. So also with what I was saying about how I feel like I just have to say this stuff and get it out of my system, these memes are sort of within me or on bits of paper, and I feel like I want to share, and this is a form of, I'm not sure if it's epimemetics or endomemetics, but just like there's epigenetics, control above the genes, I feel there's memetics, there's memes, and we usually recycle memes from our past as well as what we see in the media and learn from other people. So it's all sort of past and old and secondhand. And I feel going into the state of mania gives us access to new memes. We're actually the makers of new memes. And doesn't mean they're all correct. It just means they're new. And we can either spread them, or we can talk about them or not talk about them. And I feel like in the state of mania, we talk about them, and we can't not talk about them. But we're just sort of bouncing around talking to random people or whatever. So they don't necessarily take hold per se. And it's not a state where you're talking about the state. It's a state where you're just talking about whatever is in the moment. So now part of my harvesting process is harvesting the state by sort of unfolding and making context about the state. So I have pages of all of the things I wrote down the very first time I was in that state of consciousness, and I don't know how much of it is actually coherent. They might have been some nice thoughts and ideas, but what I'm saying is those weren't memes about the state. So now I'm creating memes which are a language to understand the state. So actually I'm seeing now that I feel like mania is epimemetics. It's memes coming from somewhere else than our own personal pool of memes, or the memes that are well known in society. And they're sort of perceptio memetics, in that we perceive something and memes get created within us, which we can speak. So if I was in manic consciousness, I could speak them and blah, blah, blah. They'd sort of spread out a little bit. Or say I was in manic consciousness, I just decided to talk to myself on video for 20 hours and then post that. Now those memes can spread more. But if I'm in manic consciousness, not all of it would be coherent per se. I might be saying, I'm the captain of the universe, which would be kind of entertaining as well. But what I'm saying is I feel like harvesting one's mania after the fact is a form of endomemetics. So it's going back in retrospect and thinking about the epimemetic process and creating endo memes related to the epi memes. So I could share epi memes and I can share endo memes, which are making meaning out of that meaning making process itself. The state itself is very meaningful. It's felt as very meaningful, and there's no need to make meaning out of that meaningful state. It's just living and being alive and celebrating and being playful, and that's the meaning itself. And so this is sort of making meaning in retrospect, which is endomemetics, which is related to the epimemetics. I have an epimeme, which is, say, the one I shared before about we're all killing each other with our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And that's to do with sort of the butterfly effect or the ripple effect, how what we do here affects somebody across the world. And it's in subtle ways that we can't necessarily perceive. If we could actually perceive it, we wouldn't do it. But that's what makes it an interesting game, is we have no idea what we're doing and what's going to happen. We're going to be surprised. The moment we find that life isn't going to surprise us anymore, we're pretty much in the state of suicide. So I feel that that's the way it is harvesting one's mania is endomemetics. It's making meaning out of the epimemes, and not that all of them were meaningful, maybe the endomimetics process is sort of our own personal pruning. So I could take that whole big long document I wrote with my first epimimetic experience, and that all felt meaningful in the time I was writing it. But now if I was to look back on it, I would be using sort of an endomimetic process, my own knowledge from in retrospect of how the process works in order to process some of those memes. And so I could sit here and say, oh, I experienced this and I experienced that, and that means this and that means that. And I do a little bit of that, but I'm more interested in the endomimetics, the meaning that I can harvest from the experience itself, because I'm not necessarily interested in going back into an epimimetic state. Maybe I don't need that anymore, but I'm interested in making meaning out of the whole process itself. So the whole process is seen as pathology right now, and I'm creating endomemes, which is making meaning and making context and sort of processing all the memes and meaning that, which is again not craving that state again per se, but it's recontextualizing how I was told to interpret that state. I never interpreted it that way in the first place, but I find it very fascinating. It was sort of like experiencing an anomaly, but within myself. And from then, people might be interested in outer space, while I'm interested in my own inner space. It's something that more directly affects my life. And so I'm going through this harvesting my mania process, which is endomimetics, and it's also endomimetics in that I'm bringing these memes from inside of me out. I could just sit here and not say anything, or I could do this endomimetic process and bring them out into something else. It's like that energy is there, which is almost like electrons, which is light, and that light, that energy within, unfolds into sounds through me, because I can see the pattern of what I'm trying to illustrate, and then that allows the sounds to just come out, because I'm speaking based on what I'm perceiving from the inside, which isn't related to my ego as much as sometimes it is, because I can see how the ego works in context to, and in contrast to this other process, which I feel mania is a process of getting one in touch with one's true way of processing, and that we are a processor of the universe, and we're processing things as much, and through processing we're also creating. I can just go about processing my ego over and over again, or I can process something else. And the ego process is very meaningless. It's mistaken as very meaningful. And so this other process is almost a meaning-making process. And I'm making meaning out of that state, out of that experience, but I'm also making meaning out of my journey since that experience and what it could mean moving forward. So that's endomimetics and epimimetics. And I feel like that is related to what David Bohm said. Dr. David Bohm said we need a new source of ideas and information. And I feel there is a different source. And a lot of people talk about being in touch with source or their intuition and things. It's just related to that. And some people are just maybe naturally in touch with that and never seem manic. And maybe other people, they go into that consciousness. And to me, I feel it's sort of like ego surgery. It's like trans consciousness surgery. So maybe some people are transgender and some people are trans consciousness, and maybe bipolar is just trans consciousness. Sometimes a person is identified with their persona, and sometimes they lose that identification and they behave more like an adult child, and they're not behaving like themselves because they're not identified with that. So what is it that keeps us identified with that? And it could actually be fear, because in the state of mania, we lose all fear, all shame, all of those sort of lower faculties that keep us clinging to our ego, which is the thing that is trying to keep us avoiding those experiences. And once we lose that fear, we lose our ego. Perhaps the ego is fear, and I feel like awe is everything but the ego. So awe is the entire universe, and the ego is not awe. It's everything but awe. It's just chattering on, and that chattering blocks the just complete losing one's breath in awe of the beauty of the universe. And I think maybe this conscious transformation, or this trans consciousness, is, I feel like the ego is the personality, and this other conscious experience is the play-sonality. So we become our playful selves when we're decoupled from that thing that prevents us from being playful. And we can be somewhat artificially playful with it, but the true playfulness, when we've detached from those words, we're actually now in touch with gestures, spontaneity, perception, pattern recognition, and all of those things. So that's another word, transformation. And transformania, as you go from in transformania, in mania, you become trans consciousness, and you go from the ego consciousness to your adult child playful consciousness. Transformania. And I think that's one of the ways we could stir it up, is just with our body language and our gestures and all of our non-verbal communication. So people that have been pathologized, like myself, have a tendency to lose their connection with their posture and their strength and their voice. And it'd be interesting to help assist people to put themselves back together so they appear more well than they are. And it's possible because they're on all this medication, not necessarily from their mental illness, supposed mental illness. And just by going out and being sort of happy clowns in different postures with no words at all, we'd be able to change the social fabric instead of waiting for somebody to come along and help us with their pathologizing language that they try to put onto us. And that's what we need to be immune to. Doesn't mean don't accept help, it just means don't take that in. It's like, yeah, you believe that, and that's how you're going to help me. Thank you. It's the only way you know how. But I don't believe that about myself. And that's part of this Transformania language, is to create different language for us, at least to think about ourselves and to see ourselves in the meantime. And just like all these autistic children, they're pathologized. Yet, if they were able to tell us what it's really like, if they were able to describe it in great detail for 100 hours, I don't think they would say what we think that it is based on our observations. They would probably be saying, you were thinking about something mean, and that's why I had a tantrum. Like, it would be something so far beyond our own beliefs and perceptions about things. Like with Temple Grandin, for example, she designed slaughterhouses for cows based on how she could see where they would get spooked and freaked out, and then they'd need so much more prodding to go through. So she designed one that would be humane. Well, in the same way, if you look around your apartment or your house, and imagine being a super sensitive child crawling around or something. How many little things would spook you or creep you out? Because they can see in a different way. She would say she thinks in pictures, and that makes sense because they have less words, and pictures would probably be the patterns of things that one is recognizing. So they can recognize patterns, and they're super sensitive, and they're super intelligent. They're intelligent in a different way. Just like I feel like people that go through this trans consciousness experience, maybe we're intelligent in one way before and intelligent in that way plus other ways after. Maybe they lose certain elements. They're not able to be functional because society's kind of traumatizing in the same way that a slaughterhouse not designed by Temple Grandin is traumatizing. So a person that goes through this trans consciousness, oftentimes they've experienced some kind of trauma or something, and then they go through it, and then everything outside in reality looks scary, so they become non-functional. Everything makes them anxious. So it's almost like they've been restored again to this adult childlike version of themselves where things seem scary because we have that sort of child perspective of recognizing the patterns of things, and we just recoil in fear because it is really terrifying out there if you're not numbed out to that. So I feel kids that have that disposition are intelligent in different ways, and probably in the ways that humanity needs right now. And if they're not actually flowering in that intelligence, it's not their fault. It's the design of reality. If their space was 100% playful, even every room of the house, they would probably be able to function better and learn, because they learn through play. And they learn through patterns, and they learn through gesture, and they learn through watching people. And if they're watching grumpy people, they're going to learn grumpiness. I was thinking about how trauma hurts the image one has of oneself. It doesn't actually hurt the living organism that we are. It hurts one's image. And when that happens, it's again something to do with the inconsistency factor. And so I feel like too, that's when we experience that inconsistency factor, we then look for a way to be consistent. So we find the consistent story in our reality to match up with that. So if I went through manic consciousness, I was being inconsistent, and then I was put into the story of mental illness because that's the explanation that goes with that pattern of becoming inconsistent. But the benefit of that in a way is that makes the image construct unstable. And when it becomes unstable, one has more chance of, say, going into altered states of consciousness because it's become unstable, and we start to see different things out in reality instead of seeing through our ego lens. Because maybe part of us doesn't want to see through that lens anymore because we're not who we think we were. This image we built up about ourselves, we're something else. I also think that society damages the hippocampus. I actually feel like moving around in society based on the ego is a subtle form of psychosis. It's illusion, it's hallucination. And then when somebody gets into full-blown psychosis, it's kind of more obvious. And so it seems like normal people just are really good at faking that they're not psychotic, when a lot of their thoughts probably are psychotic. They're just not acting on them. So they have this mechanism that prevents them from acting on their psychotic thoughts. Well, that can break down in anybody. Normality is psychotic. That's the thing. If somebody in full-blown psychosis sees the whole world as psychotic, and everyone they interact with practically is playing into that. And so it's actually a lot more sane to come upon that. I've been psychotic 4 times, and I think that helps me be way more sane. That's why I don't believe in saying that I'm a person living with a mental illness, because I've been completely insane, and so I've been able to see everything that contributes to that. And then when I'm not in that state, I'm able to not participate with that. I feel like that state actually puts me in that state to see, to have those visions, to experience all of that terribleness and experience it fully, because it's going on in the world, and it's showing that we are all one consciousness. Some of us get in touch with that in psychosis and can't handle it and say in their life, and then they're seen as they were mentally ill, when really they were seeing and experiencing the full-blown mental illness of society. And I feel like society is a mental illness, and that there's no such thing as mental health. Anything mental is actually illness. It's actually disorder. Thought is disorder, as Krishnamurti would say, not thought disorder. So it's just varying levels of psychosis. And Krishnamurti also said it's no measure of health to adjust oneself to a profoundly sick society. So that's why I don't agree necessarily in the long term with medicating people back into functionality, because the functionality of society is sick. So the people that are so-called sick have actually seen this sickness of society, and if they weren't made impotent by chemical ego band-aids, then they might actually want to do a little bit of something about it. And by turning it into a personal problem, it makes somebody even more impotent. I've been made slightly impotent, yet I still have the impetus to change. And that's why I feel like eventually I don't really want to work in mental health, because I don't believe in mental illness, I don't believe in mental health, and I feel like the people that are labeled with this kind of stuff actually see, and they have the best chance at being able to change things, because they can see all the subtle things that are happening. People that go through this trans-consciousness experience are like the temple grandins of reality. They can look around and see how it's designed in ways that are traumatizing and adding to stress, where people that are feeling the cumulative effects of this, they're feeling it, but they don't know they're feeling it. People that have gone through trans-consciousness experience can see it and feel it after the fact still, even if medication blocks it out somewhat. But they don't understand that that's one of the things that they can do. So it's not a bad thing. It's something that can help everybody. I could walk into a mental health center and be like, traumatizing, rude person, that person's energy is off, that person's scary. Like, it would be quite easy, because that's the thing. It's even people that haven't had this experience of going through a crisis, or even if you want to call it mental illness, they're still accumulating stuff over time that is kind of like a ticking time bomb. Like, everybody is a ticking time bomb, and a person can have something happen, and with the allostatic load of society and all the stress that we live with, it doesn't take much for somebody to have a breakdown. And so I feel like people that go through trans-consciousness experience can help inform with what needs to change. It's almost like children, they would be able to tell us if they knew how to communicate, but they don't. So people that go through trans-consciousness are connected again with a childlike perception in a way, because the ego consciousness isn't in the way. Oh, and I was thinking about the ego and how one of the most annoying things to do, one of the biggest first world problems, is putting a new screen protector on one's smartphone. And try as hard as you may, you probably have a piece of dust under there. And it's just like, oh, damn. But what can you do? So the ego is kind of equivalent to dusting off your table with your screen protector and then putting it on and thinking that you're going to be able to interface with your phone properly. I remember once I was in an airplane with a friend and it was kind of turbulent upon landing, and she said to me, "It's just clouds," because I was a bit of a nervous flyer. And when she said it's just clouds, I was like, okay, it's just clouds. And I sort of understood, and I just sort of let it pass by, and it didn't really bother me as much. And in the same way, the ego is kind of just like dust, and it's just like clouds. So if something pops up into my mind screen that gets me a little fired up for some reason, it's just clouds. Oh, that's nice. Like, it's just clouds. Like, it'll pass. And just not identifying with it, not thinking, I am the clouds. And now I'm gonna create a storm and create rain. And I was thinking too, with this mind screen, I feel like the mind screen is our real face. So we might put on a smiling face, but it's the energy of our interface of this mind screen that we have, where we take impressions and make calculations, and most of the time people have ego judgments going on. Whatever is going on in that mind screen, that inner image domain of judging and thinking about oneself or thinking about other people, that's actually our real face. If what's going on our interface, on our mind screen, is not something that we would be genuinely smiling about, then we're not really smiling, and we're not energetically fooling anybody. We're not fooling the universe, and with that, we are changing our center of gravity such that we're not in flow. We're accumulating allostatic load, which I think is actually like accumulating gravity, and moving away further from our light body, which could actually be, the light body could actually be our inner mind screen, our inner face. It's like our light processor version of ourself, which is like our inner mirror, which we can play images on, or we can take impressions of the outer world. But I think actually that's what makes an impression on the outer world, is that inner light body self that we are. So we can have anything on our outer face, but the inner face is actually what determines this. And I feel like that is the light body, and we're actually more that than anything. But whatever has played second by second in our life on our inner face is what has accumulated as us. So we can accumulate toxic garbage and always have our inner face, mind screen, interface polluted, and that's going to change the look on our face. That's going to change the muscles on our face and everything. Even for me, since I've been doing these videos, I practice sort of using both sides of my mouth, because this one is not as active, and I think that was from an event when I was really, really young. And I actually have like this muscle that's all like congealed together in here, and I don't think this side of my face works the same way. It's not on this side. So something happened where I probably like really clenched up, and that just really stuck together and has affected my face ever since. But even from my first videos, I think my lip was more like this. Now, just with talking over time, it's showing my teeth a bit more, which I think is better in terms of not being like stiff upper lip, like talking like this all the time. So just how I'm using my face and expressing this inner light, this interface, these memes that I've created by interfacing with reality is changing my face, and it's speaking from my interface, my inner face, my inner light body. And that's like repatterning my physical structure as I go along. So this harvesting process could actually be just talking about these memes in order to harvest myself and sort of regrow myself as a garden in a way. And I think that light is always there. And in the trans consciousness experience, when we decouple from the ego, we go more into that light, and that shifts our whole physical structure. So that shift is always there, and we can shift into it. So I could go from, say, 5'5" to probably 5'6.5" in like a snap if I was in my light body version. But it's almost like I need to unfold all this meaning and share all these memes in order to sort of rejoin with that light body version, so I am that in daily life versus just talking about it. Because right now I do realize I'm just talking about that, but I am not that. But I feel like I need to talk about it in order to get to that, which is getting it out of my system in a way. And so yeah, I can sort of see how that works, and I don't know if it's true, but it's like we have this interface, and as we go through reality, we collect gravity. We eat food, but we also sort of collect gravity like a dust filter in a way. Like our mind screen becomes a dust filter for reality when we pick up these ego hurts, and then we have this dusty screen, and those bits of dust and trauma on our inner light body self are where maybe accumulated toxins can collect and sort of poison us in a way. So maybe this is a point where it accumulated in me, where it became non-functional. The energy wasn't flowing, and then there's all this sort of tissue around there that's yucky.